Hello, everybody. My name is Boro, and I am head of Devo Team AWS business for the DACH region. Today, we are going to talk about serverless, about economics of serverless, about pay-as-you-go model, and how your company can profit from using the serverless architecture. I would like to emphasize that this is not a highly technical presentation, but rather one which will in a compact time show how and what are is AWS serverless architecture and what are the benefits, how does its economics work. It is not my intention here to go really deep into the our serverless architecture, but rather to explain a big picture on how a company can save with serverless. This presentation is mainly targeting managers and CXO level audience, while more elaborate and technical presentations on serverless you can find throughout the presentations and presented by my colleagues, solution architects from Devo team and AWS. All right, let's see what we have on the agenda today. Um, at the beginning, we will have a short introduction of what serverless is, so-called function as a service. Then we are going to have a look at the right use cases, and after that, at the wrong use cases, when to use serverless and when your company cannot benefit financially from using it. And then at the end of the day, we will talk a little bit about the benefits of the serverless approach. Let's see what is actually serverless and how can function as a service be of use for your company. Serverless architecture is a cloud computing software design solution in which a vendor provides backend services as they are needed. In serverless computing, a third party hosts applications or code running on cloud resources which are abstracted away from the user. AWS serverless architecture offers great computing power to handle workloads and scales with real-time demand. Serverless computing offers a number of advantages over traditional cloud-based or so-called server-centric infrastructure. It automates a variety of tasks, freeing developers to concentrate on the business objectives and applications what they serve, which in the end provides key economic benefits that boosts companies' return of investment. For many developers, serverless architectures offer greater scalability, more flexibility, quicker time to release, and at the end of the day, it all reduces the costs. These include the shorter development cycles. Developers have time to focus on content, code, and business logic rather than on managing infrastructure overhead or provisioning the servers. With serverless architecture, developers do not need to worry about purchasing, provisioning, managing backend servers. It delivers efficient performance without the need of over-provisioning resources. So far, so clear. Number two, let's explore what are usual use cases where the serverless architecture makes sense and can bring significant cost reductions. Here are 5 examples which are the typical right use cases for the serverless architecture. Let's do how they can do miracles and save a lot of money to your company. As a number one, we have web applications, websites, and blogs. So it's kind of like dedicating a server for the sole purpose of hosting your web application and website is a pretty outdated and time-consuming practice. You can actually go serverless to get all the availability, performance, and functionality you need without managing a single server. You can have multiple websites, you can build multiple architectures, but at the end of the day, you don't need to provision the servers. That's, of course, absolutely the cost saving factor and benefit here. Number two is a large volume of media processing. So, for example, serverless architecture can process large volumes of media files without any of the problems legacy technology has, such as software crashes, resources allocation, or full hard drives. We are here talking about music, we are talking about streaming video, we are talking about everything what we have in the media world and needs a lot of crunching and processing. Then the third one is real-time processing. Serverless architecture is also perfect for any workloads that are time sensitive. It can process real-time data, such as streaming data, with just as much security, flexibility, and cost savings in the cloud as it can when processing, for instance, a batch data, something which is running overnight, for instance. Number four, Internet of Things. As an IoT platform must be reliable, flexible, and cost efficient. AWS serverless architecture is an ideal choice as it provides all of these and other benefits, such as, for example, supporting MQ telemetry transport, one of the most prevalent IoT communication protocols. And the last but not least, reduce latency close to the end user applications. Developers who want to push some or all of their application functions close to the end user for reduced latency will require at least a partially serverless architecture, since doing so necessitates moving some processes out of the origin server. So now when we saw 5 cases where we can use and where is the best practice to use the serverless, how about that we see where it can go wrong? Not all of the modern software environments need serverless architecture. And actually, sometimes it is even better to avoid serverless in total. Let's see where your company cannot save using serverless. Again, I've listed 5 scenarios, 5 use cases where the serverless architecture can go wrong. You will see that not all is perfectly suited for serverless. Here are a few most important examples. There are more of them, of course, but these are where definitely not use serverless architecture in your software projects. As number one, and the most important, large applications with a constant and predictable workload. There are cases when it makes more sense, both from a customer perspective and from a system architecture perspective, to use dedicated servers that are either self-managed or offered as a service. For instance, large applications with a fairly constant predictable workload may require a traditional setup, as in such cases the traditional setup is probably less expensive. We are here talking about reserved instances, for instance, in the AWS world. As number two, performance and business SLAs. If you or your company have or are running strict performance service level agreements with your customers or internal stakeholders, serverless might not be the best fit. Results may vary, making your ability to meet SLAs inconsistent. That might be sometimes an issue. Number three, possible vendor lock and hard migration to other cloud providers. Here we are talking mostly about so-called sticky services. Depending on the services used, your serverless workload may not be portable if you decide to change cloud providers. So that has to be taken into account as well. Number four, legacy workloads needing a lot of transformation. Not every workload is suitable for serverless. Unless a workload was developed with serverless in mind, you might actually need to go back and do a considerable amount of planning and re-architecting to make it fit within a serverless framework. It may be actually quite prohibitive and difficult to migrate legacy applications to a new infrastructure with an entirely different architecture. So this needs to be really well taught in advance, which of the workloads are good for migration, good for transformation and modernization, and which should be either lifted and shifted or modernized in a server architecture. And number 5, long-running computing threads. It is definitely more efficient to run intensive tasks on traditional computer resources. Although AWS Lambda has increased its maximum runtime to 15 minutes, this might actually be too short for some large and time-lasting calculations. We are talking about high-performance computing calculations or something in the pharma industry, oil industry, or any other energy industry, which takes a lot of time to process seismic data or some other big chunks of data. And at the end, let's see why we should consider to use serverless to long-term improve companies' total cost of ownership. There are a couple of key advantages of the serverless architecture. We basically touched point on them in the previous slides, but let's one more time repeat them so it stays visible and we remember when we talk serverless what is important. So first thing and the first highlight bullet is no server management. The second most important is charging for the server space or computing time and reducing the costs. So you don't actually are charged for the server, you are charged per time and per server space. The serverless brings a super scalable architecture as a number 3. The hyperscalers, AWS, for instance, is constantly working on improving and adding new functionalities in the serverless world, which brings the new possibilities of building more and more complex applications using just serverless. Don't forget to quickly deploy and update of your application stacks. That's a super important. And then there is the last one, which is the decreased latency. So basically bringing some functionality closer to the user. And at the end, are you or your company considering adopting serverless? Let's talk a little bit about what Devoteam can do for you. Devoteam as your partner can work with you on a different business use cases where a serverless architecture can bring some immediate values. We can together with you define the success criterias. We can define and run with you low risk POCs that will give you the ability to envision what is possible in the serverless world. How can it actually help you? Can you transform some workloads? What would be good to transform? What would be good to do another way? We can build with you data points to assess the potential and total cost of ownership benchmarks and KPIs necessary to begin your digital serverless journey. If any interest, please ping me or the team. And at the end, I would like to thank you all for listening.